Alright guys, so I just returned back from my trip to Europe. I got mixed feelings about this experience. So in this video, the format's going to be a little bit different and allow me to share my story. When I boarded the flight back to Europe, something felt very different. It wasn't a business trip, it wasn't a conference trip, it felt like a return. A return to where everything began for me. After years in China, I landed back in Denmark, back home, back to DTU, back to building 343. The place where I first scrapped my wafers, had my first semiconductor course, misaligned mask, broke samples, celebrated tiny research breakthroughs. And of course where I built the very foundation of everything that I know today in third generation semiconductor technology, which eventually became my career and my company. Walking through those doors felt both distant and deeply familiar. My first stop was at my professor's office, Professor High O, not former professor, because once someone shapes your life, they never become former anything. We sat down and like always had great conversation, and that conversation drifted into silicon carbide. Her endeavors in that space in terms of optics, quantum, photonics, all the possibilities that silicon carbide enables. I showed her our latest 8-inch silicon carbide boule sample, and she smiled, and I didn't expect it. But that smile hit me in a way I couldn't really describe, because it wasn't about showing off a product. It was about coming back to the person who planted that seed in me for more than 10 years ago, and showing what that seed had grown into was very emotional. But in that same conversation, something hit me even harder. She told me about the constraint Europe is facing. Researchers stretched, funding getting tighter, execution cycle slowing down, and the one that shook me the most was access. Most universities in Europe today have only a single EU silicon carbide wafer supplier that they can purchase from. A whole academic ecosystem depending on one source, one bottleneck, one set of lead time, one set of limitations. Switching isn't simple. If you change a vendor, you reset months of characterization, calibration, process tuning. It disrupts entire research group. It slows down innovation, it makes progress fragile. And I sat there thinking, Europe wants resilience, Europe wants sustainability, Europe wants self-reliance, sovereignty, Europe wants faster, greener transition, stronger power electronics, EV leadership, but researchers, the people carrying the early innovation, don't even have reliable access to the very material they need, the foundation. And that was the only beginning of what I would see. So let's move on and talk about transition from academia to industry. So from Denmark, I flew to Munich, Germany for SEMICON Europa, one of Europe's largest semiconductor exhibition. I was really excited, because this conference has always been a meeting point between Europe's research strength and its industrial ambition. If DTU showed me the academic reality, then SEMICON was supposed to show me the industrial reality. The real big players, the execution engine, the ones who makes things happen. And to be fair, I met incredible people, experts, founders, executives, R&D leaders, process engineers, people with deep engineering integrity, people with genuine passion and real vision. Europe has the talents, the craftsmanships, people who build ideas with care, with quality, with patience, not chasing hype, but ensuring reliability. But very quickly, the same feeling from DTU came back. Something happened during this trip that I didn't expect. Something that honestly shook me. I looked for what naturally is closest to my own field, namely silicon carbide wafers. Where are the European silicon carbide wafer suppliers? There was none. Zero. Not a single European silicon carbide wafer supplier exhibiting. I found equipment suppliers. Yes, I saw PVA Tepler, a strong German players in crystal growth equipment. But when it came to actual wafer manufacturers, but right besides Europe's absence, there was a presence. Sinlight from China, showcasing their wafers. Tiancheng and Liguan, Chinese crystal growth equipment. Multiple Chinese offering the very tool and wafers Europe says it wants to secure. And then the moment that crystallized everything, Sinlight displayed 12-inch silicon carbide wafers. A 12-inch wafer. Think about that. The very material Europe researchers are struggling to obtain, displayed casually by a Chinese supplier, right in the middle of Munich. And I stood there thinking, my professor, one of the pioneers in the field, a person working in the top European university, still struggles to get enough silicon carbide wafers. But at SEMICON Europa, Chinese exhibitors are showcasing 12-inch wafers Europe doesn't even have access to. This contrast was painful and undeniable. And this reminded me of something we all went through not long ago. This chip shortage of 2020 to 2022, Europe learned a painful lesson then. Cars couldn't be produced, factories slowed down, some automotive lines dropped 20 to 40% in terms of capacity because microcontrollers and power semiconductors simply weren't available. Europe said it wanted to be self-reliant. Europe said never again after the pandemic chip shortage. Europe said silicon carbide is key for EVs, energy, electrification, power flow systems. But where is the execution? The gap between intention and reality is becoming too wide. At the end of the day, this video is about the wake-up call. Now, after DTU, after Munich, after speaking with so many experts in the field, the message became really clear for me. Europe does not lack the brains. Europe was one of the pioneers in silicon carbide. Europe helped build silicon carbide technology from 0 to 1. What Europe really lacks is the bandwidth, access, supply, speed, an ecosystem that can scale fast enough to match its own ambitions. Europe struggles not because the people are not capable, but because the system is slow, it's risk adverse, fragmented, and overregulated, and sometimes too protective of reinventing instead of collaborating. This is a wake-up call. If Europe wants sustainability, if Europe wants self-reliant energy systems, if Europe wants to avoid another chip crisis, then Europe must do more than talk. It must execute, it must build the ecosystem, support the suppliers, open access to materials, empower researchers, accelerate industrialization, bring back the manufacturing, collaborate across borders, and act with urgency. Now, not someday. Because silicon carbide is not just another semiconductor. It's the backbone of energy transition, the spine of EV powertrains, the future of quantum, the heart of the fast chargers, power conversion systems, and the foundation of Europe's green ambition. I didn't return to Europe to point fingers. I returned because this is home, because everything I know, everything I built started right here. And because I believe Europe deserves better. Think globally, act locally. This has always been my guiding principles. And now more than ever, I believe Europe needs both. That's why this video is not about criticism. It's a call, a reminder, a wake-up message. Europe has everything it needs except for time. And the world is not waiting. All Europe needs now is to execute. If we act now, Europe can still shape the future of silicon carbide. If we act later, it may become a future built somewhere else. And people like me can contribute even a small piece to help build that ecosystem. And that's exactly why we are all here.